You've also said that you want the local community here in Wayne to come to our church if a need arises, because that'll help our church continue to expand. It's really significant, integral part of and be a part of the community. How do you think that will be achieved? How can we really see that through?
Well, I think it starts with little things, just being actively engaged in the community. One of the things I'm looking forward to is actually being present at the Wayne Business Association so that I, as the pastor of this church and a leader here, get to know some of the other leaders and people in our community who have an important role and to be part of that conversation. And I think out of that, sometimes we learn what the deepest needs of our community are and helps us to kind of meet those. And another one of my hopes for our congregation is that we will look at the needs in our congregation and the needs of our community and see how those come together and how we can meet those needs. And one of the things for me that's been most exciting about working in churches over about 30 years is seeing how congregations have this opportunity to in some ways embody the heartbeat of a community. Because we're not just the place that's providing services, we're a place that is helping to meet the deepest felt needs of the communities in which we live, needs for things like connection and community. Sometimes the needs are as simple as a good, welcoming space for people to meet that's not a commercial space so they can, use our building and meet. And just last night I was here and there was the Wayne Oratorio Society, there were Boy Scouts, there were deacons, session, all meeting at the same time. And when I saw that, I thought, this is a great example of one of the ways the church can sort of be the heartbeat of the community, because these community organizations come together in this place. And when they come here, we have this opportunity to share the fact that God loves them and that we care about them too. And it's done in some subtle ways, but it's important. Also, I think I would love to see Wayne be a place where people come when they have needs, where they would know that this is a place where people are going to hear them, see them, know them, and care about them, and have Wayne Presbyterian Church become a place that's known for really caring for and loving not just our community in some broad sense, but our community in a very specific sense of knowing people's names and caring about them.
Where do you see the church generally and Wayne Presbyterian Church specifically fitting into the world today?
I think everybody would acknowledge that the church is in a little bit of a challenging moment. We have seen what experts call de-churching and the rise of what are called the nuns, which are not people walking around in habits, but people who don't have any religious affiliation at all. And that's a particular challenge, I think, especially among young people. One of the other challenges that we face is that the way that people engage, not just with church, but with all kinds of community organizations has changed. I've seen it because I've not been a member of the Rotary, but I've known a lot of Rotarians and people in different community organizations, and they face the same struggle, that people care about their work, but they don't want to join their organization. In the church especially, I think it's a challenge because people care about the ministry and the work that we do, but people are hesitant about joining an organization. And, there are some people who are skeptical of organized religion. That, to me, is a sign that we as a congregation and the church in general, we can do a better job of being out in the world and being helpful, being present, and showing people that being part of a community like this isn't necessarily an obligation as much as an opportunity to make connections, an opportunity to show our care for each other and for the community. And I think it really is important for churches to think hard, to pray seriously about what it means to be a helpful part of our community. Because people don't look at the church and immediately think, oh, that's a place I want to join and that's a place that's going to be helpful. Many people look at churches and wonder what on earth goes on there and think that they probably don't even belong there. I think one of our tasks is to help people realize it's a place we belong because we care about you.
Ryan, how do you plan to expand WaynePres' role in the community? What types of things do you think the church should be doing?
Well, it kind of ties back to what we talked about with DNA. And I actually think it comes first from listening, that we need to listen to each other, but we also need to listen to the community. In my previous experience in the congregation I served, we decided to go out and ask questions of both people in the community and within our congregation. And we asked the same 3 questions of everybody. We asked, what's great about living here in the church? We asked, what's great about being part of our church? We asked, what's not so great about living here, or what's not so great about being part of our church? And the third question was, what can good people do if we work together to make our church or our community a better place? What was fascinating to me, I should have known it, but I was surprised, is that we came up with the same answers. What everybody said was this. They said, what's great about the church and what's great about the community is there's so many opportunities for people to be together. There's so many great resources, and people were so happy with that. The thing that they didn't like was they felt like they weren't part of it. People would say they walked down the streets of Ambler and they would see full restaurants and people out together, and they loved that it happened, but they felt like they weren't part of it. People in church said the same thing. We see so many opportunities. We see people who know each other and serve together, but we feel like we're not part of it. And finally, the thing we could do if we worked together, everybody agreed it would be great if we had space for people to come together over common interests, even when we don't agree on everything. One of the things that we came out of that with was this belief that creating a community and a place where invitation is at the center of everything that we do is so important for us as a church. And it started inside, but it moved outside. We thought about, what does it mean to invite each other, people within the congregation, to become more deeply involved in the life of the church? But we also saw how it spilled outside. We thought, how can we invite our community outside the walls of our congregation to become more deeply involved in what we do inside the church? And it really did change our conversation and change the way we thought about what it meant to be a church, because we kept trying to build this culture of invitation at the center of everything we do. And I'll also say that part of the resonance of that for me, and I think for our church, is that that's also at the center of our faith. At the center of our faith is that God in Jesus Christ invites us into relationship with God. And that invitation is at the center of everything, and it's for everybody. It's for those inside the church and those outside the church. And I think for congregations, it's so important for us to create this culture of invitation where we're constantly inviting people to come along with us to see what God's up to and to discover what God will do.
We know as individuals that we should love our neighbors and the world we live in, but it's kind of difficult to do that.
Yeah.
Given the hostility and, frankly, the opposite of love that's out in the world.
Right.
How do we go about doing that?
First, I want to tell you, when you ask me that question, you're asking it to a fellow traveler and a fellow struggler with that same question, because all of us struggle with that question. The best advice I have actually came from an event I went to a few weeks ago with some people from Wayne Church. We went down and heard Francis Collins speak at the Philadelphia Public Library, and he's been doing a lot of work listening to people across the political and philosophical trench that we have in our society. And what he said is, it's so important to listen to people, to hear their stories, to understand where they come from, why they believe what they believe, and to do it with open-minded understanding and care for them. The one other thing I would add that, he was speaking in a secular context, but I'm sure he would say this if he was talking to us at church, is one of the most important things is for us, like out of our theological understanding and theological tradition, to understand every person that we encounter, even if we disagree with them about everything, has been made in the image of God. God loves that person as much as God loves us. And therefore, because of that, we owe them honor, respect, patience, and dignity. And I think that that is a really important thing to remember, that as we have conversations and when we're in conflicted situations, to be able to step back and say, God loves that person as much as God loves me. And I actually found that that can really change our perspective. One thing I have said for years to myself and actually to people I've worked with is, when something difficult happens, people will come and tell me, I had this conversation with somebody and it didn't go well, and they said this to me. And my first response has become, well, how can we interpret that charitably? What I mean by that is, how can we understand what a person said that was maybe not what we wanted to hear, maybe not in the way we wanted to hear it, but how can we understand that in a way that wasn't intentionally divisive, but came from somewhere else? And I found that when you practice that, it's actually very helpful in getting along.